Hello, Black Magic, Yannicus here. This is the follow-up video for suits and builds. I've had some difficulty making this video, and I'm going to try to make it as brief as possible. It's going to be just covering one template at a time, so I will have follow-up videos for other templates and other UO material. Alright, so for the first PvP template, we're going to start with the most important, which would be the Bok Mage. For which kind of Bok Mage template are we going to build? I have these 5 templates up here. I mean, there are other variations of Bok Mage templates, but I don't really find them very usable. So these are the items that you would use for each one of these templates. Here, the differences between the Bok Mage with the hatchet means that you're going to be using 90 stam instead of 80 stam. You also might have swing speed on your suit, just depending on what the hatchet is and if you have 30 swing speed on the hatchet or not. The HLD Bok Mage is the same as the cheap Bok Mage, except it uses the prismatic lenses for the hit lower defense. HLD Bok Mage with the hatchet is what you'd think. It's the same thing as this, except it has the swing speed and 90 stam. Using this, you're probably going to take a hit on some stats and some regenerations, maybe even some eaters. It is way more difficult to build. Even the HLD Bok Mage is, difficult in comparison to at least the cheap Bok Mage. The Alki Bok Mage will be built similarly to the cheap Bok Mage, except the jewels will have a lot of skill increase on it. You'll probably also try to use the Arch Lich robe, which has 10 skill on it, and the Mushroom Apron, which does have 10 Alki skill on it. So you might want to take a screenshot for reference to so you can see how you might want to be able to fit together what items. But this also does mean that the only items that you will be using to complete the suit, other than the jewels, are the tunic, the legs, and the gorget. Alright, so the next thing we do is we realize how much skill we need to have. So this is the regular Bok Mage, and it needs 50 skill, and that's to have 110 magery. You could technically get away with going with 100 and just eliminate having 7th tier spells for your macros, just stick with 6. And that means you only need 40 skill increase. It's very manageable. 5 swing speed is very important for every Bok Mage. Here, and I'll show you why. A Bakudo, if you have 90 stam, you swing max swing speed. If you have 80 stam, you have 1.5 swing speed. But if you have 5 swing speed on top of that, it makes it to where you're swinging max again. Similarly with the hatchet. The only difference is you have to have 90 stam. Now if I have 30 swing speed, it's not. But if I have 35, it is. So that's important to consider when building your suit. In my opinion, that also makes the Cameo by far the best talisman, especially because I don't really consider making Bok Mages without the damage increase. I mean, you technically don't have to have it because nerve strikes aren't based off of damage increase, it's based off of 120 real bush skill. So that's why you have to have 120 real bush. And also, it's important to keep in mind you have to have 90 real sword skill to be able to use your abilities, and 60 real tactics. For a cheap Bok Mage, you should be aiming for 20 to 30 mana regen, 18 hit point regen, 30 fire eater, 15 damage eater, 15 to 18 damage eater, 25 hit point increase, etc. You might want to use this as reference. Even with this cheap Bok Mage with hatchet, 75 damage is marked as the lowest that you should go because you need to have at least 75 damage increase to do 35 damage AIs, or armor ignores. I wouldn't go with anything less than what is depicted up on here. So things you would need to consider is what kind of hat are you going to use? Like if you use the Captain John's, which has 20 skill on it, That means you only need one jewel with skill increase on it. You would also just need one jewel with hit chance increase, while if you didn't, like let's say if you used a prismatic, both of the jewels would need hit chance increase. They're both going to also need enhanced potions, unless you do like the little mix match with the 35 enhanced potions jewel and the mushrooms apron with the 15 enhanced potions. So I deleted the last video because I didn't cover the DCI well enough while we're going over this type of jewels. It's important to note that there is a sash that has the 5 defense chance increase. It's the spell focusing sash, which is also, great for spell focusing, which is primarily used for 2 versus whatever, 2 versus random number, 2 versus 5 or so, 2 versus 2, or even 1 versus 1s. It's just, I find them particularly useful whenever it's 2 versus a number of enemies. The DCI on the sash is important because if you do not use that and you're using the 1 force jewels, so that means you would have to use the vine sash that has the fast cast recovery. You would have a difficult time reaching 30 DCI. You would be probably 25 DCI, and I do think that is too low. So if you're going with the 1-4, keep in mind you're going to have DCI on both your jewels. Now, like I said, you can get away with DCI on just one jewel if you are using the spell focusing sash. Otherwise, but you also are only going to be 30 DCI. I did point out in the video that all of my characters are 30 DCI. None of them are above it or below it. I wouldn't go below 30 DCI, and I would not go above 35 DCI because you want to hit these refinements. Alright, now we're going to go over Black Magic Suit and how I built the character. Now, it's important to note that I do only have 100 magery. I would prefer to have 105, ideally 110, but that means I would, obviously need the 10 more skill increase. My suit is built a little bit differently because I didn't use the cuffs. I mean, it's always important to note all the different variations that you could use. That's why I put that list up with all the artifacts, so you could try to just at least have an overview of how you could put these things together. So I use the Lich, as you can see, that's 10 skill increase, which means that if I were using the cuffs, only one of my jewels would need the skill increase, but because I'm not using the cuffs, both of my jewels do need skill increase. When we're choosing our jewels, and I have mentioned before, jewels are the most important thing, and it's the first thing that you're looking for when you're putting together your suit. You want to look for jewels based off of how many mods you are using. So we know that I'm using the fast cast off of this. Spell damage increase because I'm not using the cuffs. The defense, the hit chance, the intelligence, everything. I wouldn't count mana increase as a mod. It counts as maybe half of a mod. Stamina increase is better than mana increase because it does count as a hard stat, but the cap of it is only 5, so you can't get 8 or 10 like you can on the other stats or mods. I use the 35 EP on this because I am using the Mushrooms apron. I would recommend not going this route because you are losing 10 stats and 5 hit point increase. If you lose the 5 hit point increase and you're not using the cuffs, or let's say if you are using the cuffs and went with the Mushrooms apron, that means every piece of armor would have to have hit point increase on it. So it is definitely better to use the VVV signature and try to get away with just having to have 2 pieces of armor with hit point increase. Alright, so on to the jewels, or the bracelet anyway. I do have mana regen on this jewel. It is important to note that at least one of your jewels should have mana regen, or your suit is going to be lacking mana regen. Is going to be too low, probably around 17-ish, and you'll have a really hard time keeping up with somebody that does have their suit built properly. The most important thing on these jewels is that they have to have LRC, at least one of them. I mean, ideally you want both of them to have LRC on them, but if it doesn't have LRC, these armor pieces are going to be incredibly difficult to find. I mean, that's probably where most people end up having difficulties, is that, especially right now, the armor market is pretty dry. So keep that in mind. You need to have the LRC on the suit. That way you will be able to make the suit a lot cheaper or easier. Or on the jewels. You need to have the LRC on the jewels, not the suit. Alright, so we see that I also use all 8 mods from here. I did have to have damage increase on one jewel because I'm using the prismatic lenses. Alright, so overlook. Now we can go to the Lich gloves. These are by far the best gloves in the game. I had a bunch of other gloves that were auction safe worthy, and once these came out, they basically made them all worthless because they're just overpowered. I can't believe they actually released this kind of item. So with the gloves, you only need one piece. That's Fire Eater. I would make sure it's a 15 Fire Eater. I mean, I guess it could be 12, but to each their own. Mine's 15. It's the only piece on my suit that doesn't have LRC, and that's because, like I said, I was looking for LRC pieces. It makes it a lot easier to build because you can find the pieces with the hit point increase on it with LMC and the hit point regens and mana regens, but with LRC the armor is going to be impossible to find. Now if we were to add up all of the stats on my suit, I believe this is what, 47? No, that was quick math. Yeah, 47 stat increase. That's probably pretty high because I did go stat intensive. Yours doesn't need to be this high. Just get it as high as you possibly can. Keep that in mind when you do buy all your pieces of armor or whatnot, and see if it has hard stats. Mana increase is not as important. While it's nice to have, it's really not that important. You do have to have 25 hit point increase. While you could mix match pieces of armor for the 7 hit point and and be settled with 24 hit point increase, I strongly discourage against it. I find that every hit point increase does make a significant difference. 19 hit point regen, 18 is the cap. That's as much as you need. Stam regen is just nice to have. Mana regen, I feel like I'm lacking on. I used to actually have 26 on my other suit, and then I rebuilt it again, and now I only have 21. So I'm going to end up probably rebuilding it to have it around somewhere around 24, and then I'd be happy. My damage eater is max, which is 18. We went over that earlier when we were looking over the pieces of armor. That tunic that I showed earlier, I wish were poison eater, but it's not. These are not accurate. I don't know why it displays like this. Damage increase, 90, because when you enhance your Bakudo, you gain 12 extra damage increase. So technically, you could have 88 and still be 100 damage increase. If you're using a hatchet, you're going to want to be over 80 damage increase anyways. So that's because if you don't have 80 damage increase, you're not going to do 35 damage AIs. We discussed the importance of swing speed, and I'll just leave that there. Alright, so these are my stats after my suit was built. This is before I'm potted up or anything, so I mean, I don't expect yours to be quite as high, or even if maybe yours are better, who knows. But this is what they are. But when I do drink my potions, my strength and agility, this is what they're at. And then when I curse myself, keep note, I'm still 150 hit points. Hit points are by far the most important stat. While people do say, I mean, it's supposed to be intelligence is related to spell damage increase and mana regen. I haven't really noticed there being much of a difference on spell damage increase. I mean, I've always tried to keep it, you always want to have it over at least 100, but you shouldn't really have a difficulty doing that. Mana, I've had 140 on every suit or template that I've built. 140 is fine. You don't need some mass quality or quantity that once you're out because you don't have enough mana regen on the suit. You need at least 20 spell damage increase. I have over it because, you know, the items and whatnot. Alright, now let me go ahead and apple. So these are my resists when I am refined. As I noted before, you do want to have at least 75 fire and 75 energy, hence why the lowest you should go on your DCI, or the highest you should go on your DCI, is 35. I generally like to keep my physical at either 72 or 73, and then my cold at the remaining 72 or 73. They're both a trade-off. The reason why is the poison we discussed, the Jumu's Cloak, has that Poison Eater on it, so I don't ever refine anything that has poison, because every suit has a built-in Poison Eater, basically. Also, there are no spells that actually do poison damage, other than, I guess, Poison Strike from a Necro. The only thing the poison would be good for are for poison weapons. Physical is good because of shield bashers or archers that are doing their moving shots. Also, important to note, many people, including myself, do use weapons that have physical damage. Cold. Now, cold is great because a lot of other, all weapons when they're enhanced, or at least Bakudos when they're enhanced, they gain the 40 elemental damage as well. But cold also does have a couple of spells that can hit. So somebody that gets harmed a lot would like to have probably a higher cold resist. So I think that covers just about everything for a Bok Mage, or at least how my Bok Mage is built. I'm sure I've missed a lot of stuff. There are many different variations on how a Bok Mage can be built, and because of those different variations, it made this video very, very difficult to actually make. That's why I had to delete the previous version that I had up, and make sure I wasn't misleading you guys into any bad advice. Let's see, so I'm going to make another follow-up video discussing why these eaters and regenerations and everything put into these suits are so important, like even if you were using a parry mage, what does soul charge do, and etc. I also did intend to help you guys with figuring out how to vendor search the best way, because I do notice a lot of people don't actually use vendor search the right way. When looking for jewels, I'm just going to look for the best jewel I possibly can at first, and then try to pair up another jewel with it. So I'm going to look for an 8-mod jewel. This one probably might be expensive, but these are probably what I would look for. If I can't find the perfect one with Magery, I might switch. I would go down through the list. I would switch to each one of them: Swordsman, Eval, Parry. I would just probably save swords for last, because if you get discorded while you have swords increase on your jewels, you are a lot easier to hit. So keep that in mind. Armor is probably easier demonstration because the jewels are just going to have so many different variations, while as the armor, you're going to be looking for just the same mods on everything. So you would have to have at least 3 mana regen. The hit point regen, really, it's going to need to be about 3, but I never actually mark it because unsure. We also, let's just say we're looking for a hit point increase, please. And do we want LMC on it? We probably do. Do we also want our eaters, right? Let's say we want a damage eater. Now this is pretty thorough. Like this would be a good piece no matter what comes up. You got to put studded in the item name. You have to actually run 2 checks because if there are no studded, you have to type in bone for the bone pieces because these are the only 2 types of armor that you can use, either studded or bone. Reason why is because you are using the HCI earrings. You cannot use the morph earrings, and you cannot be an elf character and play a Bok Mage. A elf, as they run, they lose a lot of stam, and you're going to just get stuck on people, and you're going to end up not swinging max swing speed way more often than you should be. Also, you're not able to use the spell weaving buffs from a free circle, as a human would. Alright, so if we do a search, see great items show up. Now keep in mind, if we were to actually search for, let's say, LRC in this would be impossible to find. It would suddenly turn into a very difficult task. They might have some on auction safes, but they're going to also be like probably 500 mil to a couple plat, who knows. So I do think that covers everything. If there are any questions, go ahead and contact me, subscribe, follow, or comment in the section, whatever. I'm going to also include those 2 files that shows all the artifacts and the goals that you should have for the Bok Mage below in the comments. Alright, take care.